Enterprises struggle to detect advanced attacks quickly and thoroughly as evolving threats continue to evade current security tools. Skillful threat detection starts with diverse, high-value security telemetry to run detections on. The Chronicle platform allows security teams to store and analyze petabytes of data in one place so that you can quickly apply powerful detection rules against all of your security data. Learn more about the Chronicle platform and the latest threat detection capabilities at securityweekly.com/Chronicle. You want to get the right things done for your security program. Sounds simple, but what are the right things for you? What does done mean? And how are you going to get there? Rapid7 realizes more than anyone how hard this can be. While Rapid7's Insight platform offers you industry-leading vulnerability management and detection and response solutions, their focus is on understanding where you are so that they can help you get where you're going. Visit securityweekly.com/Rapid7 to get started. The question is simple. Have any of the systems on my network been compromised? The answer is harder than it should be. Enter AI Hunter. Active Countermeasures has automated and streamlined techniques used by the best pen testers and threat hunters in the industry to create AI Hunter, a network threat hunting solution that does the first pass of a hunt for you to identify systems that are most likely to be compromised and scores the results on a scale from 0 to 100. You can then research those systems in depth with AI Hunter. Focus your valuable time on the systems that need your expertise with AI Hunter. Sign up for a personal demo today at securityweekly.com/ACM. Welcome back, everyone, to Enterprise Security Weekly. In our October 22nd technical training, we will provide a first look at a new free resource that delivers thousands of remedies as a service to bridge the gap between vulnerabilities found and vulnerabilities fixed. On October 28th, learn how to build an integrated security platform in our webcast at 3 p.m. Eastern. securityweekly.com/webcasts allows you to register for the upcoming ones, and /on demand allows you to view our previously recorded ones. Jen Ayers is with us today. She's the Vice President of Overwatch at CrowdStrike, has over 20 years of cybersecurity experience, and responsible for a team of elite threat hunters who proactively hunt for malicious activity in global diverse environments. Today, she joins us for an interview and an overview of the 2020 Threat Hunting Report and insights from CrowdStrike's Overwatch team. You can learn more at securityweekly.com/CrowdStrike. Jen, welcome to the show.
Hey, Paul. I'm excited to be here.
It's nice to have you. I find it interesting that you manage a team of threat hunters, but also I think, as we've discussed, the attackers are doing some hunting of their own, kind of changing some of their tactics and techniques. So we're anxious to hear kind of an update as to what the attackers are up to.
A lot. It's definitely been a very busy year for everybody, I think, on many, many different levels. But I can certainly attest from a Falcon OverWatch perspective, we have probably not been this busy in years past. Number of reasons for that. There's no one particular variable aside from the shift in the landscape, opportunistic adversaries, and a lot more open doors for those adversaries to get into.
Do you think the shift from a work from home has driven some more of those open doors, or is it just open doors in general?
I think the shift to work from home definitely has contributed to that, but not directly in terms of you at your house on your home network necessarily. Predominantly from the intrusions that we've observed, it has a lot more to do with companies who needed to rapidly move to a work from home environment and had to very quickly deploy capabilities to get into the core enterprise networks. So think, standing up an RDP server in AWS, open to the wide world with basic user ID and password.
Right.
VPNs that don't have multi-factor or two-factor authentication, at least to authorize users to get in. There's a lot of different mechanisms we've been seeing adversaries use, along with the traditional, exploits, even exploits of VPNs like PulseSecure, that kind of thing as well. So we went from, I don't want to say a minimal amount of entry points to a lot, but we certainly have a lot more than we did before.
That's interesting, as the attack surface changes, but the attackers are also changing constantly. And you and I talked about actual threat intelligence, right? And that's a very overloaded term. And when you had described to me some of the things you were discovering, I'm like, that's actually really good threat intelligence, right? I don't know if there's a very scientific way to kind of present that, but I think understanding what the attacker techniques are as a whole, maybe not specific groups, interesting to look at specific groups, but understanding how they're changing tactics and why, I think is very applicable to changing your enterprise security program.
Absolutely. Absolutely. When you kind of look at, the broad adversary base, and you can track, you can track one, you can track 100. But what it boils down to, at least from Overwatch perspective, which is think of that more of a tactical intelligence. We get to see what these adversaries are doing. You have CrowdStrike intelligence who writes about, what potential targets are, geopolitical situations. We get to see these actors in action. And what we've observed, over the years, and especially this year, has been a fundamental shift in TTPs. And I'll focus on e-crime, probably because it's one of the ones that essentially resonates with everybody. Ransomware, more organized crime, opportunistic type of adversary. But when you look at where they were in 2018, how far they've come in 2019, and where they are today in 2020. Keeping track and understanding how they're doing what they're doing becomes a critical component to protecting your environment, to protecting yourself. You look at the entry from our reporting on CrowdStrike side in 2018, talking about big game hunting, that move from focus on everybody's, the consumer side and encrypt everybody's, photos and, charge 1 Bitcoin, to now let's encrypt everybody in the finance department. We've been able to recover from those things a lot faster as individual people. So that fundamental shift to, hey, let's target your most important assets and charge more money. And now to this year, one, ransomware as a service, where you have a lot more players in buying into this and expanding that scope. And two, now moving into not just encrypting your most critical assets, but let's steal the data from those assets, charge you more money for not just decrypting, but also promising to keep your to delete the data they stole.
Yeah, I feel like there was a time, probably in that 2018 time, where it reached a peak where everyone was just all the criminals were ransomwaring everyone, right? And there was some infighting happening, from what I understand, that they were kind of getting mad that like stop, like we've got legitimate or illegitimate businesses to run, I should say, and here are all these groups just ransomwaring everyone, drawing a spotlight on this, and that seems to have changed, right? It seems to become more organized and more targeted towards financial gain in different ways.
Absolutely. So, and I always smile when I say this, and then I kind of feel a little bad that I smile because I find this so fascinating.
Right.
When you look at that evolution, it's truly amazing. It does take time, and you think about it, like put yourself, not necessarily from a moral and ethical perspective, but put yourself in that business shoes. This is a business at the end of the day. They're there to make money. I don't know necessarily about marketing campaigns or sales campaigns necessarily, but their ultimate goal is to make money. So we went to big game hunting, which allowed them to claim bigger ransoms, and then ransomware as a service. Okay, well, as we started having all that infighting, let's monetize that. Let's take the tools that we know that works and sell them. And for a percentage of whatever ransom is claimed. We went from pretty, a few key players in the ransomware space, fairly sophisticated players, to now hundreds of them. 10% of the ransom. I'll give you the ransomware. I'll give you some ideas on how to do it. I might give you the infrastructure to distribute, your second or third stage, depending on what the particular adversary is selling at that time of day. You have, distribution services widely available across several, at least major players in that group. You think about Pinchy Spider from a CrowdStrike reporting perspective. Circus Spider is another good case in point example. Circus Spider known for, specifically for that NetWalker ransomware and the major shift to data extortion this year as well. So it's really fascinating how this evolution has occurred in essentially what is a very short time span, not just about quantity, but it's quality as well. So I'm going to give you a really good Trojan, and I'm going to give you a really good piece of ransomware, and I'm going to teach you how to do RDP password spraying, and go out, and all you got to do is pay me 20% of whatever you get.
Right. It's interesting. It's somewhat similar to the carding market and the changes that happened in the carding markets over time as well, which I really think PCI kind of disrupted their models and kind of scurried underground. Of course, it still happens today, but they went through similar kind of fit, like, oh, I can get all of these credit cards. And like, then they realized, well, we need to like distribute these markets and services similar to ransomware, right? Like your job is to go get the numbers. Your job is to validate them. And then your job is to go monetize them. And there was different ways to do that, right? It sounds like ransomware is going through a similar evolution.
I would agree with that. And I think, especially as security practitioners, it's not our job just to protect against, what exists today, but put yourself in their shoes and think about what could be coming next.
Right.
Think about it, I find it fascinating to think about it like just really as a business model. If you're running a business and your competition is starting to take, a little bit more chunk out of your total addressable market, what do? You innovate. You come up with something new.
Mm-hmm. Matt?
One of the good news items out of this report is nation state attacks are pretty flat, right? I mean, you definitely see the big bump up on the e-crime side from your report, but the nation state stuff is kind of staying steady state. I think that's good news, right?
It is not. Don't mistake volume for activity in that. The reason why the e-crime piece of that pie is so big is because it is the more dominant activity that is happening. But the fact that nation states are consistently between 18 to 20% of that pie year over year doesn't mean they're doing less. They're just doing it a lot quieter. Nation states don't have a business model of 172 affiliates buying into their ransomware. They have, generally the same steady state structure that they're using, but that doesn't mean that they've gone away.
Got it.
The
other thing I thought was really interesting is you break down the different attacks, the different TTPs. And when I look at the matrix, valid accounts, valid accounts, valid accounts, valid accounts, can anybody say multi-factor authentication?
I think I've seen and read a few things of varying opinions on that. I am very much a proponent of implementing multi-factor authentication just to introduce friction, if anything else. Is it 100% secure? Nothing is 100% secure. But as we see things from Falcon OverWatch side, it is about disrupting adversaries before they can achieve their objective. Make it difficult for them and make yourself less interesting to them so that they go target somebody else who's going to be an easier victim. Introducing friction points like multi-factor authentication, making sure that your VPNs are not just allowing generally anybody with a straight user ID and password in, introduce some, level of access control mechanisms, make it harder for them to go from start to finish.
Yeah, it really stuck out to me because I saw that in so many places and it's so deep red, like the number of attacks, it's like you could thwart that attack vector pretty, I think, easily with a multi-factor authentication approach.
So one thing that's been interesting to me is, and having, as Paul pointed out earlier, having been in this industry for a really long time, I think a few of us on this podcast can relate. Remember back in the day with those RSA key fobs? Those were $20 a piece. And if you wanted to implement in a wide scale enterprise, it was, mailing them out to people, typing that serial number into the seed record from the RSA token. That was hard. And we still were able to do it. When you look at multi-factor authentication today, or different mechanisms, it's so easy and it's so cheap that I don't understand why we don't have a broader scale implementation of it. Now, I do understand, like I spoke about, the need for speed, get something out, get our people access, keep our business running in 2020. But is it really take that long to do that? Is it that hard to link up to the Google API, use a Google Auth, Duo? I don't know technically from a technical implementation perspective, but I think what's happened is we've stopped considering those as options.
I'm guilty of losing more than one RSA token in my career, for sure. And then there was always the thing where you'd enter the number, but there was that like race condition where by the time you entered it in, it had expired if it got to like the end of its expiration. I hated that. And you're right, Jen. It's so much easier today.
I forgot about that.
They were awful.
Back in the day, I actually managed those things for very, very large enterprise.
Right.
Oh, man.
Yeah, I used to work for RSA, so we used to have the little soft tokens on the phone because by then nobody needed the little key fobs anymore.
Mm-hmm.
So
I bet that switch was a huge relief. Much easier to deploy that soft token than it was in mailing out those hard tokens.
Oh yeah,
Jim, what are some of the other trends that you were able to glean from the report?
So I think some of the key things, especially, is on the industry, on our top 10 industries. We saw a pretty big shift this year. We typically see technology almost always at the top. There's a couple reasons for that. Technology is a very broad bucket. A lot of things kind of fit into that particular industry or meet the requirements of fitting into that vertical. But when you start to look at 2, 3, and 4, the fact that manufacturing made its way up to number 2, up from, even beating out telecommunications, which has been our number 2, for the last year. That was pretty eye-opening. Now, manufacturing predominantly being targeted by e-crime, again, opportunistic. But if you kind of look and put 2 and 2 together a little bit, it's pretty interesting on sort of what our observations are there. Why is manufacturing one of the more predominant industries for e-crime attacks? Well, manufacturing became one of the most, it was extremely important before, but let's see, most visible, industries across the board in terms of the supply chain model, the structure that we have. And, personally, how many Amazon boxes arrive at my door for all the stuff that I've now ordered rather than gone into a store and gotten. So the whole world has seen, an uptick in a number of different, manufacturing products as a whole based off of supply and demand. The other thing we're seeing too is, manufacturing companies being used, sort of as a pivot point to get to other things. So if the supply chain model, you have manufacturing company doing piece number 1, piece number 2, piece number 3, observing, that literal lateral movement. Start at company 1, scope it out, do recon, identify company 2, scope it out, do recon, identify company 3, do a campaign attack against all of them.
Yeah. And we've seen that over the past 20 plus years is attacking that supply chain has been very successful. Oftentimes not fully in scope in a pen test either, which is kind of interesting. You may do the research, but those companies, you don't have permission, right, to attack some of those other companies, right? Whereas attackers don't require permission, right?
That's a valid point. Attackers, I saw on LinkedIn the other day, somebody had posted one of the posters from KiwiCon 2009. It's like basically hackers don't give a crap, and it has all the reasons as to excuses on the right hand side. They don't care about your POV, that it's only a POC. They don't care that it's too hard.
Right.
And that same concept applies to the supply chain model. They don't care that you can't get from, as a pen tester, get from company 1 to company 2. They can.
Exactly.
Right.
Exactly.
Yeah, it's why third-party vendor risk management programs are still top of mind for a lot of CISOs, is because they don't fully understand that risk of their supply chain, and yet they don't have the ability to go test some of those third-party vendors either, which makes it even harder.
Or in many cases, work with the same third party and ask them for the results of their test. There is, having worked in a large scale enterprise and having, helped implement their vendor risk management program a way long time ago, I know working with a lot of the suppliers that we had, there is that rub. Nobody wants to share that information. Nobody wants to be the supplier that says, oh yeah, we don't have, we have local admin passwords and it's all the same.
Right.
Nobody wants to admit that.
Yeah. Because to your point earlier, it is a business and they are out there to make money, and they want to do it at all. They don't want to necessarily have a bunch of burden to get those contracts. So yes, I ran third-party vendor management in my past too, so I know how challenging it is.
I have a feeling that if you and I sat down, we probably crossed paths at some point in our careers.
Yeah, we probably did.
Jen, tell us a little bit about the team that you manage, because I think many of us that have worked or are working in enterprises today, we see maybe a malware kind of specimen. We see reports about various, e-crime groups, and we want to dig in more. But your team has a lot of dedicated resources to doing that. And while I don't want you to talk about all the little tips and tricks that they do, right, to give away too much, but at a higher level, what can we as enterprise businesses glean from your team in the various points of research that they're doing?
So I think that first and foremost, from what we do Falcon OverWatch and managed threat hunting, we have a vast amount of telemetry that we collect from the Falcon platform.
Mm-hmm.
And this gives us a very good opportunity to see things at a global scale and narrow that down to individuals, to an individual or a company scale. We're able to see activity happen in near real time, think actor, hands on keyboard, able to identify that type of behavior, within minutes of it essentially happening. But the important, while that sounds cool and while that sounds, really amazing, we are extremely focused on what we do. We do this 24/7 by 365, and this is the only job that we have.
Right.
We aren't distracted by incident response processes. We aren't distracted by, having to acknowledge every security alert that comes along in a particular product. We are the inverse and looking at the unknown. So I think if anybody was particularly curious at exploring this space, or any company was looking at building threat hunting, the key things to keep in mind is this is a full-time job,
Mm-hmm.
and you're not always going to get a result from it. It is important to look at that unknown, to test hypothesis, and to do your best to understand how adversaries operate so that you can attempt to understand what they're going to do next.
I've been there so many times too, though, to your point, Jen, when you're like, oh, I'm going to dig into this one, right? Like, I got time. We don't have an incident right now. I'm going to dig into this one. You're like, you get a half a day or a day into it, and you're like, well, that really wasn't all that interesting, right? Like, that was maybe average everyday malware that I thought was something a lot more interesting, but it wasn't, right? And your team is going through those various exercises where, for me, now I just burn half a day or a day doing that, and to what benefit, right?
Absolutely. Our background, our experience, the lessons we've learned, the capabilities that we've developed as Overwatch, have allowed us to be really good at doing, the near real-time threat hunting. But think about the scale at which we operate from a CrowdStrike perspective and a Falcon platform perspective. While we may find intrusions every single day, it's not necessarily the same environment or the same industry every single day. It's not necessarily being repeated at the same customer over and over again. So establishing threat hunting in your own organization, be prepared to live your life with a 1% true positive outcome.
Right.
If in a year, in a month.
Yep. But the benefit, the value back to CrowdStrike, though, I assume, is by understanding how those hunts happen. That's also improving aspects of what the product can ultimately do as well. But it's making that investment to be able to do that research, to learn from it, to make your product better. So there's also the benefit side to, I think, the broader CrowdStrike from what you guys do as well, right?
Broader CrowdStrike and hopefully to the industry as a whole. In our report, we came up with an acronym. We call it search. No, that's not unique. We didn't invent the word search, and we're not claiming that by any stretch of the imagination. But it does help simplify what we do and how we do it, the methodology that Overwatch does. But the key component is the last word, which is H, or hone, is feeding that back in. If you think about malware or scripted behavior adversaries use, or common tools that are being used by adversaries and pen testers alike, a lot of that is known behavior. There should be no reason why your product cannot prevent against known behavior or known repeatable behavior. It's also very time consuming for a group like Overwatch to consistently say the same thing over and over again. Oh, look, it's Cobalt Strike doing this. Oh, look, it's Mimikatz dumping creds again.
Mm-hmm.
Why not just prevent that? Feed it back in. Tell the world about it. Mimikatz in this case is being used by this adversary doing these bad things. And then start to look for what people aren't seeing.
Absolutely.
Right.
Let's see. Folks that want to learn more can go to securityweekly.com/CrowdStrike. Jen, thank you very much for appearing on Enterprise Security Weekly today.
Tons of fun. Thank you.
Also, there is a link to the report in the show notes as well, the threat hunting report that we mentioned. So, Jen, thanks again. And that will conclude this edition of Enterprise Security Weekly. Thank you, everyone, for listening and watching. We'll see you next time.